So it's proved to be the mother. For us it's ground floor, but for you it's first floor. So it's normally on the second floor. And now they made this little exhibition for you to see it all together. And with this one, the grandmother, so the mother of the general's wife, one is not sure whether it's also a portrait of her, because it's not signed.
What's your connection to Fürstenfeldbruck?
Well, I guess would be my great-grandmother what lived here on my father's side. So, and also actually, I grew up in the States. Was raised by my uncle, who used to come here during the vacations, for example, from Italy. They would come and visit his essentially grandmother. So I think it's, you know, and I knew my uncle's, his name was Edward, you know, and he's responsible for many things, including my being in science, because he was a physicist. And so that attracted me, and to work initially in what we call molecular biology, and that's where the Nobel Prize came. So I think it's sort of seeing your roots for the first time.
So you haven't been here before?
I've never been here before. Yeah.
What's your impression?
No, and it's always startling, and I think but it's also I think it's gratifying to see where you essentially he was my father and his wife was my mother, in the sense that my mother wasn't capable because of her experience in Dachau to actually raise me, and so they took over and when I got there, I was terrible in the sense that I wasn't human, so they had to transform me from an animal to a human.
So this socialization started
That's
very
right.
late.
That's right. Right.
Yeah, you mentioned your mother going through a very hard time when she was in the Nazi concentration camp in Dachau.
Right.
And in that time, you grew up in northern Italy on your own. Would you be willing to say a few words about that? Yeah,
no, I think, I think her experience was much worse than mine, mainly because a child doesn't question the situation they're in. They simply think this is the world. Okay. So you're not concerned that whether there's rightness or wrongness. You're simply concerned with survival. And I became very good at procuring my own food. So, and therefore I survived. And those who weren't as capable, died. So I think it's, I think, people think, well, you don't learn anything during that period of time. And obviously I wasn't going to school, or didn't learn how to read, or I learned how to write, or anything like that. But nonetheless, you learn about life and survival and taking care of yourself. And I think it's, I don't regret it.
So you grew up in the streets of northern Italy. How did that affect your character and your later development?
I think you learn to be patient. You learn to use your eyes, and the main thing you're interested in is simply food. And you'd go several days without food, and you get used to that. And actually, at this time, I can go 3 or 4 days without any food and not even think about it. Okay, so it's sort of always your body starts adjusting to it, and I think it's. It's not an easy education, but I think it's still an education, and it's simply that you skip the days that you play and become, now you're in serious involvement, and then you take the world quite seriously, and I think it's, sometimes, I have children on my own, and I spoil them, but I think maybe I'm doing them a disservice, because now one of the things that affects me is that, you know, in our own laboratory, sometimes people, rather than doing things themselves, collaborate with somebody else to do a certain procedure. But we become very self-sufficient. We do everything that we need within our own lab. And I think that's probably an outcome of that. So that, you know, you have to take care of business and total business.
So you believe that the hardship in your early years really affected your ability to be a scientist?
I think so. Yeah, no, because you concentrate, you put priorities, you know, so you're growing up very quickly, and then taking advantage of that situation that you're in. I mean, I remember one part that I was indignant because I had a bunch of pears, and I was walking down the street, and this a person who has outdoor stall for selling fruit and so on came rushing out and saying, "You stole my pears." And I was very indignant because I said, if I'd stolen them from you, you would have never seen me. So, you know, so you take pride in your work.
Even if it's an illegal thing.
Even if it's an illegal thing, right.
So do you believe that people nowadays might have it too easy in life?
I think so. I think so. And certainly my daughter does. So I think it's, no, I think, and I think some rough times are probably good because you know, you get through them, you know you can. And you know that the other end, I mean, when I went first into the States, my nickname, or they couldn't pronounce Mario for some reason, and they called me Cheerio because I was always smiling. And, you know, what wasn't there to smile about? You know, food every day, everything was provided, and so on. So it's a, you know, so that when you are in a situation, then you really appreciate, you know, the small things in life, which you often take for granted.
Did learning come easy to you once you had the opportunity to attend school?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things that the teachers told my aunt and uncle, they said, you know, this kid is never going to learn how to read. It's too late. And, you know, so you're always come up with people thinking that you aren't going to be able to take it. But in fact, this thing is actually very good. It can learn languages just like, you know, a month later I was speaking English just fluently. So it's, no, I think, and you know, in my own experience, we actually limit ourselves rather than let ourselves expand. And so I think what we have to learn is to actually use the full facilities that we have, rather than, you know, saying, I can't do it. You always say, I can do it.
I just need to find a new way.
Yes, that's right. And that's discovery. Yeah.
So your mother, once she got out of the house, she came to find you.
Yeah.
And together you emigrated to the United States.
And it took her 2 years to find me because, you know, I was moving, because you're moving from one city or town to another simply because after 2 or 3 weeks everybody knows what you're up to, and so you have to move on. And so she had to sort of retrace my steps, and was mainly calling different hospitals and saying, do you have a record of this person? And then she made a connection, and she, you know, she found me in the hospital. And at the time, I had actually typhoid and malnutrition. But you know, she found me. She got there on my birthday. I knew what my birthday is. And you know, a week later, we were on a boat to America.
And then you simply went on to win a Nobel Prize. Do you think that the drive you had to survive, you later transferred to your
Maybe. And you know, it's very difficult to figure out where that comes from. You know, and it's something. For example, you want to give it to your children, you know, because I think it's essentially, you know, being competent, that you're capable of doing whatever you want to do. And I always have I'm very optimistic about anything. So I think anything's doable. And in fact, some of the work that I wanted to do that actually won the Nobel Prize, when I submitted a grant, actually they said it was impossible. And that gave me real stimulus to prove to them that they actually, I could do it. So I think, and it's important to reach as far as you can. I think it's, don't limit yourself.
How does it feel now, having achieved everything that you have under your belt, to be back to the roots of your family?
I'm just at the beginning.
That's a lot more than most people achieve in a lifetime.
No, so I think it's, I think there's lots left to do, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm still working full time, and I think there's lots to be done, and I'm very excited about the projects I'm working on now, and I think they have enormous potential.
And how is it to see the work of your grandmother? Have you known her personally?
No, but I do know. I have lots of her paintings, and she was a fantastic painter, a impressionist painter, and so I use those as inspirational. So I think to me, art and science are not that far separated. I mean, we use many of the same processes. So I think, and there was a lot of art and a lot of science, both in my own family. So my uncle was a physicist, and my mother was a poet, and so a lot of the different family members have gone the full spectrum of art, literature, to science.
And now, lastly, what is, or does it mean anything to you to have these really multinational connections, roots in Europe?
No, well, I actually do that in my own lab. I have, one time I had around 20 people in 14 languages represented in my own lab. Okay, so people from all over the world coming and working. And I think that's where interesting things happen. Not only do I choose people that have very different backgrounds, but also they're working in very different fields, and then amalgamate them, and then out comes something new.
So that is represented in your own life.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So it's a recapitulation, essentially, of a formula, which I think it's, people often say, we should be more diverse. I say, it's just natural to have diversity, and you need it in order to really be able to succeed.
Yeah, it's genetically. Is there anything that you believe is important for our viewers to hear that I haven't asked about?
I think, right now we're in an era where we're fighting with each other, and that's a real waste of time. I mean, I think people should, this is a very precarious situation where we have to take better care of our planet, and the only way we're going to do it is to do it, and start exploiting our planet and really, become the stewards of our planet, and if we don't, we'll become extinct, and that's happened many, many times. And evolution doesn't care, it just keeps on going, and we may relegate ourselves to extinction if we don't take better care of ourselves and our planet.
Vanessa?
In der Südsakristei der Klosterkirche Fürstenfeld hängt ein Bild, das die Großmutter von Professor Capecchi 1916 gemalt hat. Da war in Fürstenfeld ein großer Gottesdienst mit dem damaligen Erzbischof, und dazu wurden die königlichen Hoheiten erwartet, haben am Gottesdienst teilgenommen, und sie hat diesen Augenblick in einem wunderschönen Bild festgehalten.
Und da kam die Anfrage, ob der Herr Professor dieses Bild noch einmal sehen könnte, was in der Sakristei hängt. Und natürlich haben wir das ermöglicht.
Ja, wir interessieren uns einfach sehr für Medizin und Biologie. Und wurden halt über den Biologieunterricht gefragt, ob wir hier kommen wollen.
Ich darf hier unseren Landrat Thomas Kammersinn vertreten. Ist er hier der Landrat des Landkreises Fürstenfeldbruck. Und deswegen bin ich hier.
Dear Professor Capecchi, dear guests, it's unimaginable what path a human being can get to reach his place. Now you're here, and we are very happy about
Thank
that.
you.
Welcome, Professor Capecchi.
Thank you.
Now, I hand over to the youngest member of our advisory board, Adrian Thieler.
Thank you. Welcome everybody, and I think in the name of our foundation and everyone here, I would like to extend a warm welcome to Professor Capecchi, our guest of honor here today.
Okay.
For those who don't know, Mr. Capecchi won the Nobel Prize in 2007 in medicine and physiology for his work in genetics on the knockout mouse. Thank you very much for participating here today. Interestingly, Mr. Capecchi has a very personal connection to our charity. His grandmother, mother, and uncle stayed in this house as guests of the Kester-Haeusler family after his grandfather was killed in World War I. During this time, his grandmother, Lady Lucy Dodd Ramberg, painted many pictures, some of which she has gifted to the Kester-Haeusler family and which are now on display here today. In 2022, a movie was made on the life of Mr. Capecchi called Hill of Dreams. Unfortunately, due to time issues, we can't show you this movie here today. But we did send you the trailer with your invitations, and I urge everyone to watch the movie because it's an amazing story about a truly inspiring person. Thankfully, Professor Capecchi has agreed to answer a few short questions in a sort of lightning speed date round, which is going to be guided by Mr. Daniel Andergassen, a TUM molecular biologist and research leader. Thank you for agreeing to participate on such short notice. The questions will be asked by a few students from local schools who are very eager to meet you. So, without much further ado, I would like to hand the word to you now for our speed dating round.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's also a great honor from my side that, to moderate the speed dating session with the students, and I'm sure there are many research-related questions or personal-related questions to Professor Capecchi. So should I hand over the microphone, or this? So maybe we start with the first question that we have. Maybe just hold up your hands and we can start. First?
Yes, I'd like to start with a very easy question. What constituted the biggest obstacle in your research on knockout mice?
Okay. So that's a very good question. And the biggest obstacle was that they thought I submitted a grant to do generate a knockout mouse. And the reaction of the committee that's going to give you the money said it was impossible, and no money. So right away, you're faced with a dilemma. Should you just drop it and do work on another project, or should you prove them wrong? Okay. And for me, the choice is actually fairly simple. I'm challenged by people not being able to believe what's possible. Because I think in science, nobody should ever say never. Nobody should ever say something's impossible, because then somebody's going to come along and do it. Okay. That's the nature of science. So I took it as a challenge, but what I want to remind you is that it's also at a risk. Okay. You're taking a big risk, because I was going to use money from another grant and to do this work. Now, say 4 years, most grants are for 5 years, okay, but you have to reapply to renew it for 5 more years, 4 years later. So what would happen if 4 years later I didn't have any results? Okay. I would be sweeping floors. Okay. So, but I was willing to take that risk, and fortunately 4 years later I had results. Okay, that's all timing. And then I sent, so once I had the results, I could send to the very same committee that said that was impossible. Now I want to extend it and do even more things. And their reply was, we're glad you didn't follow our advice. So they even had some humor. Okay. So I think sometimes you have to take risks. I mean, and especially in science, it's important to take risk. I usually tell people, don't take a risk that may sacrifice your career. But at the beginning, very beginning, you get a grant, and I would say 30–40% of that grant should go towards risky things, and then the rest into more safe things so that you get your grant renewed. But because I think where the things are happening are right on the edge, where you have no idea whether they'll work or not. And that's the excitement. I mean, if I knew the results, you know, why would I bother doing the experiment? Okay. So always you're trying to do things that are on the edge. And some people are comfortable not going very far, and I like to go to the very edge. And I'm doing that now, and I did it back then. Good question. Thank you. Another question. Thank you. Uh-huh.
I have a question that, are there any recent developments or technologies in genetics that excite you?
Yeah. Whenever you ask scientists, you know, what's the most important thing that, or exciting thing they're doing, they'll always tell you what they're doing right now. And I'm one that actually every 10 years, I completely change my life. I go into a completely different field, okay? And it's an amazing change, because you're not only changing what science you work on, but you're changing a whole, who you interact with. 3 years ago, I was working on cancer, and so I was going to cancer meetings, okay? And then before that, I was working on development. And before that, I was working on developing gene targeting. And before that, I was working on microbacteria and viruses. Okay? So every time changing the whole society that you're working with. And I think that's good for your brain. It loves challenges. If you start repeating things, it goes to sleep. It's bored. But if you go to new things, all of a sudden, and the other thing that's important, you know, when you also go to a new field, you have to start at the bottom again, okay, and work yourself up. And I think again, that's a challenge. You know, don't take that as being unfair. It's just life. You have to start at the beginning, because at the bottom, because you're just learning about it. And then you slowly work it up. But I think the other aspect of it is being naive is actually healthy, because you don't know the questions you shouldn't be asking. And you're likely to then ask questions that aren't being addressed. So it sort of develops what we call a niche, a reference point that's comfortable. Good. Other question?
What inspired you to pursue the career in molecular genetics?
Who inspired me?
What inspired you?
What inspired me? Okay. Well, I mean, in terms of people, I mean, I worked with another Nobel Prize winner, and that's Watson Crick, who made this, figured out the structure of DNA. And, you know, there's actually a family tree. There was a very good professor in Turin, okay, and he had 3 students. One was Del Becco, another was Levi Montalcini, and the third was called Luria. Okay. All 3 students got Nobel Prizes. Okay. Then Luria had a student named Watson. Okay. Del Becco had a student named Baltimore. They won Nobel Prizes. And then Watson has a student named Capecchi, okay, and so on, okay. So you can see there's a tree being developed here. It's a scientific tree, and it's not an accident. There are other such trees, okay. Why? Because all of a sudden you're working with these people and you see that they're human. There's nothing special about them. So the thing that occurs to you, they can do it, why can't I do it? Okay? And then that gives you the confidence to do anything. So, you know, so that's inspirational. You know, you should have the confidence that you can do anything. And if you do, you will do anything. Okay? Because a lot of what you're going to be doing takes confidence. Takes, you know, you listen to your gut, okay? And it's not going to steer you wrong. Really listen to it, okay? And the other thing is you work on what you're passionate about. Because if you're working on something you're not passionate about, you're not going to think about it. You never know when a good idea arises. But if you're not thinking about it, then it's never going to occur. Okay? So you have to, it has to be in your gut, in your, right here, boom, and then listen to it. And then take advice and march forward. And I think, you know, all of you are capable. We actually limit ourselves. We're the ones that are limiting ourselves. It's not other people. It's yourself that limits yourself. And you have to break those barriers and simply say, I can, and then go forward.
Hello, my question would be, what is your take on the controversial topic, nature versus nurture? Nature versus nurture.
Nature, okay, nature or nurture. And I think it's always both. It's always both, okay? Because they play on each other, okay? You have to be able to, you have to have stimuli from the outside, and then you have to be able to react to that, okay? So it's always an interplay between that. Everything that we've developed, eyesight, smell, touch, those are all to experience the real world, okay? And then the real world is what we've developed all those organs to be able to assess. So it's always the interplay between the two. And I think, and that's the beauty of, you know, Mother Nature is amazing. I mean, it just, I always, you know, marvel at what she's done. And I see it, and then what I want to do is understand how she did it. You know, she's had 4 billion years to develop whatever she's done, so she's very mysterious. But the challenge is for us to, you know, figure out exactly all the way down to the molecular level, how has she done it? And then it's always a surprise. And that's, you know, I get paid to play. I solve puzzles all the time. I can be a kid my whole life. Okay, you can't beat that. Okay. Somebody pays you to play, and that's what my daughter says. You know, you're always goofing around. Okay, and that's true.
Other question from the student in the back.
Your research is mainly focused on embryonic stem cells. Is there any way to use the same way of gene manipulation with already differentiated cells?
Are you asking what's the extension, essentially, of that
Yes,
approach?
could you use the same way of manipulate cells with cells that aren't pluripotent?
I still don't quite understand the question. I'm sorry.
I think the question is if you can do it in a differentiated cell to do the which you started with.
No, I mean that's the beauty of stem cells is that they're multipotent. They can do anything. Okay, they can become muscle, skin, hair, and so on. An interesting side story is that, you know, we wanted to do gene targeting, we wanted to do in mice, and we wanted to make mutant mice. Okay, but when we were ready to do that, the cells to do it, I knew what they were. You know, embryonic stem cells, but they didn't even exist. Okay, and so the question is, what do I do at this point? But I knew they were going to come. And why do I know they're going to come? Because we needed them. And human intuition is when you need something, you get it, okay? Somebody gets it. What existed were what were called EC cells, embryonal carcinoma cells. And they're derived from tumors, but they were very inadequate in the sense that they didn't contribute to a very important lineage, and that's sperm and eggs, okay? And without that, you don't have a next generation, okay? It's just the birds and the bees. So, but the question was, you know, what do I do? And so then when I was about to do the experiments, I heard a rumor that there was somebody in England that was starting to look at trying to make ES cells or EC cells from embryos rather than tumors. And so what I do is just get on the phone and call him up and I say, is this rumor correct? And the name of the person is Martin Evans. And he said, yes, we're working on that. And I said, oh, can I come to your lab and learn how to do that? And he said, sure. Okay. He could have said no. And then he has half the puzzle and I have half the puzzle, and nobody would have gotten anywhere. But he said yes, we collaborated, and therefore we were able to solve the whole problem. So the take-home lesson from that is collaborate, don't compete. I mean, collaboration will always win out. And so, you know, and it's how science works. We don't invent everything, we rest on what everybody else has already contributed, and then we extend it.
Other questions from the students?
These are very good questions, by the way. Good. You're a bright audience.
Are there any ethical considerations or concerns that you believe should be addressed when it comes to gene editing or genetic manipulation?
Uh-huh. You mean, you're asking an ethical question. And in biology, you're going to naturally always come to ethical questions. And what you have to do is simply face them and know what's happening. I mean, I certainly knew, you know, one use of what we're going to do is gene therapy. And so, you know, and all the procedures going towards gene therapy. So I think you have to, you know, you're going to confront ethical questions, and the best way to do that is just being transparent and really thinking it through. And there are things I won't do, okay? But it's my personal choice. For example, if I break a bone, then it would be nice to know how you fix it, okay? But I'm not willing to break a bone of a mouse to learn how to fix it, okay? That's an ethical choice. But I'm not saying that that's bad or good. You have to make up your own mind as to what you're willing to do or not willing to do. And it's an individual thing. And I think, you know, some of the things I do, my own daughter thinks, Dad, what are you doing? I made her a birthday present. I made a really little mouse, okay, about a third the size of a normal mouse. And it had long, what we call Angora hair, just much, much longer than normal, and it had a curly tail. And I thought it was fantastic. I was really pleased with that outcome. And I gave it to her, and she just horrified what I had done to that poor mouse.
So your laboratory's website states that your discovery makes it possible to modify any mouse DNA sequence at will. Is this already possible, or will this be possible with human DNA too? So would it be possible, for example, to actively use your research to find genetic diseases such as cancer or trisomy 21 in order to heal those affected?
Yep. It's doable and it's being done. Okay, and that's again, an ethical dilemma. But I think, and initially, the first time they did gene therapy, they didn't think it through, and it was a disaster, and it put the field back 10, 20 years. Okay, now they've gone back and are much more careful, and now gene therapy is working. Okay, and it's really working well. I still have some questions about it, and mainly is that it's expensive. And when things are expensive, not everybody can afford it. And so people that can afford it will get it, and people that can't afford it won't get it. And I think, again, that's a big ethical question. Medicine should be available for everybody. That should be a given. Our health is, that we maintain a healthy life is a given, and that should be available to everybody. But so one has to think about it and the answer is simply either make gene therapy cheaper, or alternative find another means to do that procedure. Can you find a pill that will cure cancer, for example, which would be a lot cheaper to make? So I think we're always faced with questions, but we have, as human beings, we have to find solutions that are ethical.
There's one more student question, I guess.
How do you think your contact to James Watson has influenced you?
How do I face conflict of what?
How do you think your contact to James Watson has influenced you?
So not conflict. No, so you're asking who's influenced me and how, in essence, yeah. No, you take that. I take, that's all the time that happens. Okay, students influence me, by the questions they ask, by their enthusiasm, and so on. Professors, influence me. Watson influenced me. Many other professors along the way. My uncle, okay, who's a grandson of who lived here, influenced. He was a physicist. He had an enormous influence on my going into science. I should say, my first quarter of going to college, I was a political science major because I thought the world problems were all politics. I lasted one quarter because I couldn't find science in political science. Okay. So I switched to physics. So again, it's your choice as to where you go. Okay, but what's fun about life is, we're influenced by the people around us, and the ones that are setting good examples, and who functions as mentors, and the students that actually give you energy. And I think their approach should work. Okay, you're essentially replacing a defective cell with one that works and that can replace it. And so, but I think, some of the problems are associated with it. You have to find somebody that has very similar blood to you. Or me, or whatever, whoever has the disease, you have to match so that we don't reject those cells. And that's not tricky because the immune system is looking at a lot of different markers. But I think it's a viable approach. But the alternative is to do gene therapy and simply correct the gene using the cells from that person's body. And so I think in the long run, that'll be what's being done. But I think, those experiments were done here, actually, in Germany, and they worked beautifully, and they should work beautifully. I mean, the nice thing about the blood system is you can replace it. We're working with a very similar system now. It's called microglia in your brain. Okay, those cells you actually can also take out, modify, and then put them back in. So they're going to be conduits for all sorts of neuropsychiatric disorders because you have that capability. The future, we have no way to see what the future is going to bring. But it's continually changing. I mean, that's one reason I love science. It's completely changing, and yesterday doesn't count. It's always today and tomorrow.
Thank you. Any other question from the students? Otherwise, we hand over to the general audience. There are for sure plenty of questions. There is one more. Perfect.
In gene therapy, does the immune system of someone ever recognize that there's a new gene that has never been here and attack this cell with a new gene?
No, I mean, in gene therapy, we'll utilize the host cells to modify. Okay, so it'll be essentially fixing up the gene in a host cell that can be re-engrafted and not rejected.
More questions from the students? Or thank you very much for addressing all the questions.
Thank you.
And
I wish you all luck in terms of you're the next generation, and I hope a lot of you go into science and bring things that we never dreamed about.
Thank you very much.
Wunderbar, ja, super, sehr schön. Genau, und Sie dürfen ein bisschen weiter quasi sich hinten verteilen.